The morning sun streamed through the large windows of Metro Mart, casting long shadows across the polished linoleum floors as Jasmine Brooks pushed through the employee entrance at exactly 7:45 a.m. Her steps were light, almost bouncing, as she made her way toward the time clock. Today felt different, charged with possibility. Any day now, she expected to receive the call that would change everything: her bar exam results. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Morning, Jasmine, Elena Rodriguez called out from behind the customer service desk, her warm smile visible even from across the store. At 52, Elena had the kind of presence that commanded respect, not through authority, but through genuine care for everyone around her. She'd been working retail for over 20 years, and her experience showed in the way she handled both difficult customers and workplace politics with equal grace. "Good morning, Elena," Jasmine replied, her voice carrying the unmistakable tone of someone who believed good things were coming. She swiped her badge and heard the familiar beep of the time clock. "How was your weekend?" "Busy as always with the kids, but good. You seem extra cheerful today. Any word yet?" Jasmine shook her head, but her smile didn't fade. "Not yet, but I can feel it. This is going to be the week." She had spent 3 years in law school, working nights and weekends at various jobs to pay for her education. Metro Mart had been a godsend. The flexible hours allowed her to study during slower periods, and the management had been accommodating when she needed time off for exams. Well, most of management. As if summoned by her thoughts, Derek Walsh emerged from the back office, his presence immediately shifting the atmosphere in the store. At 38, Derek had the kind of swagger that came from believing he was more important than he actually was. His polo shirt was always perfectly pressed, his name tag positioned with military precision, and his eyes constantly scanned the store like a hawk searching for prey. "Brooks," he called out, his voice cutting through the morning pleasantries, "make sure your register is properly set up today. Corporate's been cracking down on cash handling procedures." Jasmine nodded politely. "Of course, Mr. Walsh. My register's always been accurate." Derek's eyes lingered on her a moment too long, the kind of look that made her skin crawl, but which she learned to ignore. She'd worked retail long enough to recognize the type: managers who felt threatened by employees who were clearly destined for bigger things. Derek had never explicitly crossed any lines, but there was always an undercurrent of something unpleasant in their interactions. "See that it stays that way," he muttered, before turning his attention to Tommy Martinez, who was quietly arranging shopping carts near the entrance. Tommy, at 17, was the kind of kid who noticed everything but said little. He'd been working at Metro Mart for 6 months, saving money for college, and had quickly learned to stay under Derek's radar. But Jasmine had noticed how Derek seemed to watch certain employees more closely than others, and Tommy, despite his exemplary work ethic, was one of them. "Martinez, those carts aren't going to organize themselves," Derek barked, even though Tommy was already working efficiently. "Yes, sir," Tommy responded quietly, not looking up from his task. Jasmine felt a familiar knot form in her stomach. She'd witnessed this pattern countless times: Derek's tendency to micromanage employees who didn't fit his narrow definition of the right kind of worker. But today she pushed the feeling aside. Soon, she'd be starting her career as an attorney, and Derek Walsh would be nothing more than an unpleasant memory. She made her way to Register 3, her usual station, and began her opening routine. The familiar motions were soothing: checking the cash drawer, ensuring the receipt paper was loaded properly, wiping down the conveyor belt. These simple tasks had sustained her through law school, providing the steady income she needed while she pursued her dreams. "Jasmine, dear," a familiar voice called out. Mrs. Patricia Williams approached with her small shopping cart, her silver hair perfectly styled, and her posture as straight as it had been during her 30 years as a school principal. At 73, she remained one of the most formidable women Jasmine had ever met, and definitely the wisest. "Mrs. Williams, how are you this morning?" Jasmine's face lit up. Mrs. Williams had been shopping at Metro Mart for years, and she always made a point to come through Jasmine's line when possible. "I'm doing well, sweetheart. The question is, how are you? Any word on those results?" "Not yet, but I'm trying to stay positive." Mrs. Williams leaned closer, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "You know, I've been principal at 3 different schools, and I've seen thousands of young people come and go. I can spot the ones who are going to make a real difference in this world." She reached across and squeezed Jasmine's hand gently. "You're one of them." Thank you, Mrs. Williams. That means more to me than you know.
When you become a lawyer, not if, when, you remember that justice isn't just about the law. It's about standing up for people who can't stand up for themselves. This world needs more people like you in positions of power. Jasmine felt a warmth spread through her chest. Mrs. Williams had a way of making her believe in possibilities she sometimes doubted in the quiet hours of the night. I'll remember that. As Mrs. Williams selected her weekly groceries, always the same items, always with exact change ready, Jasmine noticed Kevin Mitchell making his rounds. At 19, Kevin was the youngest security guard Metro Mart had ever hired, but he took his responsibilities seriously. Unlike Derek, Kevin treated everyone with the same level of respect, whether they were customers or employees. "Looking good, Jasmine," Kevin said as he passed her register. "You've got the best customer service scores in the store, you know that?" "I didn't know they tracked that. Derek doesn't share it with you guys, but corporate sends monthly reports. You're consistently in the top percentile." Kevin's expression grew more serious. "Just wanted you to know that your hard work is noticed, even if not everyone acknowledges it." The comment hung in the air with weight that both of them understood, but didn't need to verbalize. As the morning progressed, the store filled with its usual Tuesday crowd. Jasmine served customer after customer with the kind of efficiency and warmth that had earned her those high scores Kevin mentioned. She knew most of the regulars by name, remembered their preferences, and always had a kind word ready. But she remained acutely aware of Derek's presence, the way he seemed to circle back to her area more often than necessary. He'd pause behind her register, ostensibly checking inventory or observing customer flow, but his attention was always focused on her actions. It was subtle enough for most people wouldn't notice, but Jasmine had developed a sixth sense for this kind of scrutiny. Around mid-morning, she noticed Bob Hendricks entering the store. At 68, Bob was another regular, though his visits had become less predictable lately. He'd been a customer for years, but recently, Jasmine had noticed he seemed more confused, more easily flustered. Today, he appeared particularly disoriented, standing near the entrance and looking around as if he couldn't quite remember why he'd come. "Bob looks a bit lost today," Elena observed, appearing at Jasmine's side during a brief lull between customers. "I've been noticing that more often lately. Maybe we should keep an eye on him." Elena nodded. "His daughter came in last week asking if we'd noticed anything. She's worried about him driving, but he won't give up his independence." Jasmine watched as Bob finally seemed to remember his purpose and headed toward the produce section. There was something heartbreaking about watching someone struggle with the simple act of grocery shopping, something that had once been automatic, becoming a challenge. "Ladies," Derek's voice interrupted their conversation, "this isn't social hour. We have customers to serve." "We were just discussing Mr. Hendricks. He seems to be having some difficulty today." Derek glanced toward Bob dismissively. "He's been shopping here for years. He knows where everything is." The callousness of the response wasn't surprising, but it still stung. Jasmine had learned that Derek's worldview was remarkably narrow. Anyone who didn't fit his expectations was either a problem to be managed or ignored entirely. As the morning wore on, Jasmine found herself thinking about Mrs. Williams' words about standing up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves. She'd chosen law precisely because she wanted to make a difference, to be a voice for justice in a world that often seemed unfair. But right now, she was just a cashier in a grocery store, watching small injustices unfold without the power to do much about them. That, she told herself, was about to change. Very soon. The lunch rush was winding down when Bob Hendricks finally made his way to Jasmine's register. His cart was fuller than usual, and he seemed more flustered than she'd ever seen him. His normally neat appearance was slightly disheveled, his shirt was untucked on one side, and his hair looked as if he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. "Good afternoon, Mr. Hendricks," Jasmine said warmly, hoping to put him at ease. "Oh, hello, dear. I'm having one of those days, you know." His voice carried a tremor of anxiety that made Jasmine's heart go out to him. She began scanning his items with deliberate slowness, giving him time to process each step of the transaction. He'd purchased his usual items: milk, bread, bananas, his preferred brand of coffee, but had also added several items that seemed random, as if he'd wandered the aisles picking things up without a clear plan. "That'll be $67.84, Jasmine said gently.
Bob fumbled with his wallet, pulling out bills with shaking hands. He counted them twice, then seemed to lose track and started over. Jasmine waited patiently, pretending to organize receipts while he struggled with what should have been a simple task. "I'm sorry, dear. I seem to be having trouble today," he apologized, his embarrassment evident. "No worries at all, Mr. Hendricks. Take your time." Finally, he handed her what appeared to be the correct amount. Jasmine counted it quickly, $70 exactly. She made change and handed him the receipt along with his $2.16 in change. "There you go. Have a wonderful afternoon." "Thank you, sweetheart. You're always so patient with an old fool like me." "You're not foolish at all, Mr. Hendricks. I'll see you next week." She watched him walk away, noting how he seemed to pause halfway to the door, as if trying to remember something. Then he continued out to the parking lot, and Jasmine turned her attention to the next customer. 20 minutes later, the relative calm was shattered. "Excuse me! Excuse me!" Bob's voice carried across the store, high-pitched with distress. He was standing near the customer service desk, waving his arms to get attention. "I need to speak to a manager immediately." Derek, who had been in aisle 7 pretending to straighten merchandise while actually eavesdropping on employee conversations, immediately perked up and strode toward the commotion. "What seems to be the problem, sir?" Derek's tone was professional, but carried an undertone of annoyance. "I've been robbed," Bob declared, his voice loud enough that half the store turned to stare. "That cashier over there," he pointed directly at Jasmine, "she stole money from me." Jasmine felt the blood drain from her face. She had been in the middle of helping a customer, but the woman stepped aside, clearly uncomfortable with the sudden drama unfolding nearby. Derek's eyes lit up with something that looked suspiciously like satisfaction. "Are you certain about this accusation, Mr. Hendricks?" "Of course I'm certain. I came in here with $80 in my wallet, and now I only have $12 left. She must have taken extra money when I wasn't paying attention." Jasmine's mind raced. She remembered the transaction clearly. He had given her exactly $70, and she had given him the correct change. But Bob seemed genuinely distressed, and she could see the confusion in his eyes. "Mr. Walsh," she said, stepping away from her register, "I think there might be a misunderstanding. I remember Mr. Hendricks's transaction clearly, and—" "I don't want to hear your excuses," Derek interrupted, his voice growing louder. "This is a serious accusation." Marcus Thompson, who had been restocking shelves nearby, approached cautiously. As assistant manager, he technically outranked Derek, but Derek's aggressive personality and willingness to complain to corporate had effectively neutralized Marcus's authority in most situations. "Derek, maybe we should handle this privately," Marcus suggested quietly. "No," Derek snapped. "If there's theft happening in my store, it needs to be addressed immediately and transparently." Jasmine noticed that he'd said "my store," a telling slip that revealed how he viewed his position. She also noticed that several customers had stopped shopping to watch the unfolding drama, their faces a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. "Mr. Walsh, I would be happy to go over the transaction step by step," Jasmine said, maintaining her professional composure despite the growing knot in her stomach. "If there was an error, I'm sure we can figure out what happened." "Oh, you're sure, are you? You're sure that you can explain why a long-time, respected customer is missing money after shopping at your register?" The implication was clear, and it stung. Derek was painting this as a conflict between a trustworthy customer and a suspicious employee, and his tone made it obvious which side he had already chosen. "I'm suggesting we review the security footage and my register records," Jasmine replied calmly. "That should show exactly what happened."
Bob, meanwhile, was growing more agitated. "I don't need to see any footage. I know what happened. I counted my money before I came in, and now it's missing." Elena Rodriguez had been watching from across the store, and now she approached, her expression grim. "Derek, I think we need to slow down here. Jasmine has been working here for over a year, and she's never had any issues with her register. Not once." "Are you questioning Mr. Hendricks' honesty?" Derek demanded.
I'm not questioning anyone's honesty. I'm suggesting that there might be an innocent explanation.
"Like what?"
Elena looked at Bob with sympathy. "Mr. Hendricks, is it possible that you might have made purchases somewhere else today, or perhaps miscounted your money?" Bob's face flushed red. "I am not senile, young lady. I know how to count money." The denial was so vehement, so defensive, that it made everyone uncomfortable. Jasmine could see the pain in his eyes, the fear of losing his independence, of being seen as incompetent. "Of course you do, Mr. Hendricks," she said gently. "No one is suggesting otherwise. But sometimes these things can be confusing, and if we could just—" "I don't want to hear any more of your lies," Bob interrupted, pointing an accusatory finger at her. "You took my money and I want it back." Derek crossed his arms, a gesture of authority that made his position clear. "Brooks, I need you to empty your pockets." The request hung in the air like a slap. Jasmine felt heat rise in her cheeks, not from guilt, but from the humiliation of being treated like a common criminal in front of customers and colleagues. "Mr. Walsh, I don't think that's necessary," Marcus said quietly. "We should follow proper procedures." "I am following proper procedures," Derek snapped. "When there's an accusation of theft, we investigate immediately." "The proper procedure is to review the security footage first," Jasmine said, her voice steady despite the anger building inside her. "Kevin can pull up my register activity for the last hour." "I'll decide what the proper procedure is," Derek replied. "Now empty your pockets." The store had gone quiet, except for the ambient sounds of the air conditioning and the distant hum of refrigerators. Customers were staring openly now, some recording with their phones. Jasmine realized that whatever happened next would likely end up on social media within an hour. She slowly reached into her pockets and pulled out her car keys, her employee badge, and her phone. No extra money, no evidence of theft, because there had been no theft. "Satisfied?" she asked. Derek looked disappointed, but not deterred. "Check your register. I want to see if you're over." This at least was a reasonable request. Jasmine returned to her register and ran a mid-shift report. The numbers appeared on the screen, clear and indisputable. Her drawer balanced perfectly. "I'm exactly even," she announced, "not a penny over or under." Derek scrutinized the screen as if looking for hidden numbers. "That doesn't prove anything. You could have pocketed the money and replaced it with your own cash to balance the drawer." The accusation was so absurd, so obviously reaching for any possible explanation other than the obvious one that Bob was confused, that Jasmine almost laughed. Almost. "Mr. Walsh, with respect, that makes no sense. Why would I steal money only to replace it with my own money? Maybe you were planning to take it at the end of your shift." Marcus stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable with where this was heading. "Derek, this is getting out of hand. The register balances, there's no evidence of theft, and we haven't even checked the security footage yet." "I don't need to check the security footage," Derek declared. "I have a customer saying he was robbed, and that's enough for me." The statement was so outrageous, so clearly a violation of basic fairness and due process, that several people in the crowd shifted uncomfortably. Elena made a sound of disgust, while Tommy, who had been watching from near the cart return, shook his head in disbelief. But Derek wasn't finished. He was building momentum now, feeding off the attention and the power of this position. "This is exactly the kind of thing I've been talking about," he continued, his voice growing more authoritative.
When people think they can just help themselves to other people's money because they think no one is watching. The coded language wasn't lost on anyone present. Derek was saying things he couldn't say directly, implying character defects that he couldn't explicitly name. But everyone understood the subtext, and Jasmine felt the familiar sting of recognition. This wasn't just about Bob's missing money. This wasn't even really about her. This was about Derek's need to put someone he saw as other in their place, to demonstrate his power over people he considered beneath him. And there was nothing she could do about it. Not yet.
The confrontation was drawing a crowd now. Word had spread through the store with the speed that only gossip and drama could achieve, and employees were finding excuses to pass by the front registers. Customers had stopped shopping entirely, some positioning themselves to get better views of the unfolding spectacle. Elena Rodriguez had seen enough. At 52, she had witnessed more workplace injustices than she cared to count, and she had learned that silence in the face of obvious wrongdoing was complicity. She stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. "Derek, this is absolutely ridiculous and you know it." Her accent carried the authority of someone who had fought too many battles to back down from one more. Jasmine has been working here for over a year. Her register has never been short, not once. She's gotten commendations from customers, and corporate has praised her customer service scores. Derek whirled on her, his face flushed with anger at being challenged publicly. "Elena, this doesn't concern you. I suggest you get back to your station." "It concerns all of us," Elena shot back, her voice rising. "When you treat good employees like criminals without evidence, it concerns every one of us." Tommy Martinez had been watching from the cart return, his 17-year-old mind processing the injustice unfolding before him. He was naturally quiet, preferring to observe rather than speak, but something about this situation demanded action. His legs felt shaky as he approached the group, but his voice was steady when he spoke. "Excuse me, Mr. Walsh," he said, his respectful tone contrasting with the gravity of what he was about to say. "I was bagging groceries for the customer behind Mr. Hendricks, and I saw the whole transaction. Jasmine handled everything correctly." Derek turned his glare on Tommy, and the teenager felt the full force of management disapproval. "Were you watching specifically for theft, Martinez?" "No, sir. But then how can you be sure you saw everything?" Tommy swallowed hard, but he didn't back down. "Because I always pay attention. That's what you told us to do during training. Stay alert and aware of what's happening around us." "And what exactly did you see?" "I saw Mr. Hendricks give Jasmine what looked like the right amount of money. She counted it, gave him his change, and handed him his receipt. Everything seemed normal." Derek's expression grew more hostile. "Are you calling me a liar, all of you?" The pain in his voice was evident. Here was a man who had once been sharp, competent, in control of his faculties, now facing a situation where his own perceptions were being questioned. Mrs. Williams' expression softened with compassion. "No one is calling you a liar, Bob, but sometimes our minds play tricks on us, especially when we're under stress. It happens to all of us." "Not to me," Bob insisted, but there was a tremor in his voice now, uncertainty creeping in where there had been absolute conviction moments before. Kevin Mitchell had been monitoring the situation from his security station, watching the crowd grow and the tension escalate. As the youngest member of the team, he often felt like he had to prove himself, but he also believed strongly in doing things the right way. He approached the group carrying a tablet, his security footage queued up and ready to view. "Mr. Walsh, I have the security footage from Register 3 for the time period in question. Would you like to review it?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you were enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. This was the moment Derek had been dreading. The security footage would show exactly what had happened, leaving no room for interpretation or bias. If he viewed it and found no evidence of theft, which everyone except Bob seemed to expect, he would have to admit he was wrong. And Derek Walsh was not in the habit of admitting he was wrong. "That won't be necessary," he said dismissively. "Sir?" Kevin looked confused. "The footage shows everything clearly. It would settle this whole matter." "I said it won't be necessary," Derek repeated, his voice rising. "I have a customer's testimony, and that's sufficient." The crowd stirred uncomfortably. Even people with no legal training understood that refusing to look at evidence was deeply problematic. Elena threw her hands up in frustration. "This is insane, Derek. You're refusing to look at video evidence that would prove what happened?" "I don't need video evidence when I have an eyewitness." "You have 3 eyewitnesses saying nothing unusual happened, and you're ignoring all of them." Marcus Thompson had been standing on the periphery of the confrontation, watching his colleague and friend Derek make what he knew were terrible decisions. As assistant manager, he technically had the authority to intervene, but Derek's aggressive personality and political connections within the company had always made Marcus reluctant to challenge him directly. But this was going too far. "Derek," he said quietly, stepping forward, "I really think we should step back and review the footage. This is getting out of hand." Derek spun toward him, eyes blazing. "Are you questioning my judgment, Marcus?" "I'm suggesting we follow proper procedures. Corporate policy requires us to review security footage before taking disciplinary action based on theft allegations." "I know what corporate policy says." "Then why aren't we following it?" The question hung in the air, unanswerable and unanswered. Because the truth was that Derek had no interest in following policy if it meant he might have to admit he was wrong. He had made his decision based on bias and assumption, and now he was trapped by his own prejudice. Jasmine was standing in the center of the storm, watching it swirl around her with a mixture of anger, sadness, and resignation. She had worked hard to maintain her dignity throughout this ordeal, but she could feel it slipping away with each passing moment. The longer Derek refused to look at evidence, the more it appeared to observers that she might actually be guilty of something. "Mr. Walsh," she said, her voice cutting through the raised voices around her, "I am requesting that you review the security footage. As your employee, I have the right to have theft allegations properly investigated." "You don't have any rights here except the ones I give you," Derek snapped, the mask of professionalism finally slipping completely. The statement was so blatantly authoritarian, so clearly inappropriate that several customers audibly gasped. One woman shook her head and muttered, "This is awful," while pulling out her phone to record the interaction. Elena stepped closer to Derek, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "What did you just say to her?" Derek realized he had gone too far, but instead of backing down, he doubled down. "I said I'm the manager here and I decide how investigations are conducted." "No," Mrs. Williams interjected, her voice carrying the authority of decades in education. "You decide how you handle customer service issues and employee scheduling. You don't decide how to ignore evidence and treat people unfairly." The elderly woman's rebuke stung more than the others, because it came from someone Derek couldn't dismiss as a troublemaker or subordinate. Mrs. Williams represented the community, the customers who kept the store profitable, and her disapproval carried weight. But Derek was too far down this path to turn back now. His pride, his prejudices, and his need to maintain authority had created a situation where admitting error would be seen as weakness, and Derek Walsh viewed weakness as unacceptable. He looked around at the faces surrounding him, employees, customers, witnesses, all waiting to see what he would do next. Some looked expectant, others disgusted, but all were watching. In that moment, Derek made the decision that would change everything. "That's enough," he declared, his voice carrying across the entire front of the store. "I've heard enough testimony, I've seen enough evidence, and I've made my decision."
Jasmine felt her heart sink, knowing what was coming next, but unable to prevent it. Brooks,
Derek continued, his voice cold and final. "You're fired, effective immediately." The words hit the store like a physical blow. "You're fired, effective immediately." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the ambient sounds of the store, the hum of refrigerators, the distant beeping of other registers, the soft music playing overhead, seemed muted by the weight of what had just happened. Jasmine stood perfectly still, her hands at her sides, her face composed despite the storm of emotions raging inside her. She had known this moment was coming from the instant Derek refused to look at the security footage, but hearing the words spoken aloud still felt like a punch to the gut. "Derek, you can't be serious," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're firing her without any evidence, without following any of the proper procedures?" "I am following proper procedures," Derek replied, though his voice carried less conviction than before. "I have a customer complaint, I've conducted an investigation, and I've made a decision based on the evidence." "What evidence?" Elena demanded, stepping forward. "You refused to look at the security footage. You ignored witness testimony. You've provided no evidence whatsoever." "The customer's testimony is evidence," Derek insisted, but beads of sweat had appeared on his forehead despite the store's air conditioning. Mrs. Williams shook her head slowly, her expression of profound disappointment. "Young man, I have seen a lot of unfairness in my 73 years, but this is among the worst displays of poor judgment I have ever witnessed." Derek's face flushed red. Being lectured by an elderly customer in front of his employees was humiliating, but he had painted himself into a corner. Any retreat now would be seen as admission that he had been wrong from the beginning. Bob Hendricks, meanwhile, was looking increasingly uncertain. The absolute conviction he had felt earlier was wavering as he watched the consequences of his complaint unfold. I just wanted my money back. I didn't want anyone to lose their job." Tommy Martinez found his voice, though it shook with emotion. "Mr. Walsh, this isn't right. Jasmine didn't do anything wrong. We all saw what happened." "Martinez, if you keep involving yourself in matters that don't concern you, you might find yourself looking for a new job, too," Derek snapped. The threat hung in the air like poison. Several customers shifted uncomfortably, clearly disturbed by Derek's authoritarian response to a teenager simply telling the truth. Jasmine finally spoke, her voice steady despite everything. "Mr. Walsh, I would like to request a formal review of this decision. I believe I have the right to appeal to corporate headquarters." "You can request whatever you want," Derek replied coldly, "but my decision stands, and I want you off the premises immediately." "Can I at least clock out properly, gather my personal items?" Derek glanced around the store, suddenly aware that dozens of people were watching this interaction, many with their phones out recording. "Fine, you have 5 minutes." Jasmine nodded once and walked toward the employee break room, her head held high. Elena immediately fell into step beside her, while Tommy hurried to catch up. "This is insane," Elena muttered as they walked. "Completely insane. Derek has finally lost his mind." "I'm going to call corporate myself," Tommy said, his young voice filled with righteous indignation. "This is discrimination, plain and simple." Jasmine appreciated their support, but she also recognized the precarious position they were putting themselves in. "You both need to be careful. Derek just threatened Tommy's job, and Elena, you have 3 kids to think about." "I've been dealing with men like Derek my whole life," Elena replied firmly. "I'm not going to start backing down now." In the break room, Jasmine opened her small locker and retrieved her few personal items. A law textbook she'd been reading during breaks, a spare pair of earrings, a photo of her family from her law school graduation. The items seemed to represent her entire life at Metro Mart, and she felt a pang of sadness despite everything. "Jasmine," Tommy said quietly, "I want you to know that what happened out there, it wasn't about the money. It wasn't about Mr. Hendricks being confused.
Derek has been looking for an excuse to get rid of you since the day you started talking about law school. The observation was more perceptive than Jasmine might have expected from a 17-year-old, but Tommy had clearly been paying attention to workplace dynamics. "I know," she said simply, "but knowing why something happens doesn't always make it easier to deal with."
Jasmine closed her locker and turned to face her friends. "I'm going to do what I've always done. I'm going to trust that things happen for a reason, and I'm going to keep moving forward." They walked back to the front of the store together, where Derek was waiting with barely concealed impatience. The crowd had grown larger, and more customers were openly expressing their displeasure with what they had witnessed. "This is ridiculous," one woman was saying to her companion. "That girl has always been nothing but professional and courteous." "I'm never shopping here again," another customer declared, loud enough for Derek to hear. "If this is how they treat their employees, I don't want to give them my money." Derek's jaw tightened as he heard the complaints, but he was committed to his course of action now. "Brooks, I need your name tag and any company property." Jasmine unpinned her Metro Mart name tag and handed it to him without a word. She had no other company property. Her uniform polo shirts were technically hers to keep according to company policy. "Security will escort you to your vehicle," Derek announced. Kevin Mitchell stepped forward, looking deeply uncomfortable. "Jasmine, I'm really sorry about this. This isn't right, and everyone knows it." "It's okay, Kevin. You're just doing your job." As they walked toward the exit, Mrs. Williams intercepted them. "Jasmine, dear, I want you to know that what happened here today is not a reflection of your character or your worth. This is about one man's poor judgment and worse character." "Thank you, Mrs. Williams. That means more to me than you know." "I have a feeling," the elderly woman said with a slight smile, "that Derek Walsh is going to regret this decision very, very much." There was something in her tone that suggested she knew more than she was saying, but Jasmine was too emotionally drained to pursue it. She simply nodded and continued toward the door. Outside in the parking lot, Kevin walked with her to her modest sedan. "Jasmine, I want you to know that I'm going to preserve that security footage. Whatever Derek says, I'm not deleting it." "Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate that." "And I'm going to call corporate myself. This whole thing was handled completely wrong." Jasmine got into her car and sat for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, processing everything that had just happened. Through the store windows, she could see Derek still standing near the registers, surrounded by the aftermath of his decision. Marcus was talking to him intensely, clearly upset. Elena was comforting Bob Hendricks, who looked confused and distressed. Tommy was helping other customers, but his movements were mechanical, his mind clearly elsewhere. As Jasmine drove away from Metro Mart for what she assumed would be the last time, she couldn't help but think about Mrs. Williams' words about justice sometimes coming from unexpected directions. She had no way of knowing just how prophetic those words would prove to be. The Metro Mart employee break room never felt as heavy with tension as it did the morning after Jasmine's firing. Employees filtered in for their shifts, whispering in small groups, their conversation stopping abruptly whenever Derek appeared in the vicinity. Elena Rodriguez arrived 30 minutes early, as was her habit, but instead of her usual cheerful greetings, she moved through her opening routine with grim determination. The events of yesterday had crystallized something in her mind. She could no longer work in an environment where good people were destroyed by petty prejudice and abuse of power. Tommy Martinez clocked in with red-rimmed eyes. He had spent much of the night thinking about Jasmine's firing, texting with classmates about what he had witnessed, and wrestling with the knowledge that staying silent made him complicit in an injustice. "How are you holding up?" Elena asked him as they crossed paths near the time clock. "I keep thinking about how calm she stayed. Even when Derek was treating her like a criminal, she never lost her dignity. I don't know if I could have done that." "She's stronger than most people twice her age. But strength shouldn't be required just to be treated fairly at work."
Derek emerged from the office, his demeanor noticeably different from his usual swagger. He had spent a restless night second-guessing his decision, not because he thought it was wrong, but because of the negative reaction it had generated. Several customers had already called to complain, and he'd received an uncomfortable voice message from district management asking for a detailed report on the incident. "Morning, Derek," Marcus said, approaching with a stack of paperwork. As assistant manager, Marcus had spent considerable time overnight documenting the events, trying to present them in a way that wouldn't get the store in trouble with corporate. "We need to talk about yesterday." "There's nothing to talk about. I made a management decision based on customer complaints. Case closed."
Derek, you fired an employee without reviewing security footage, without checking her employment record, and despite multiple witness testimonies supporting her innocence. That's not a management decision, that's a liability. The words stung, because Marcus was right, and Derek knew it. But admitting error at this point would be admitting that his decision had been based on bias rather than facts, and Derek wasn't prepared to face that reality. Meanwhile, Kevin Mitchell was in the security office, quietly making copies of the footage from Jasmine's register. He had reviewed it multiple times overnight, and each viewing made Derek's decision look worse. The video clearly showed a normal transaction. Bob fumbling with his money, Jasmine waiting patiently, the correct change being given. More troubling was what Kevin had discovered when he extended his review period. The footage showed Bob stopping halfway to the exit, looking confused, patting his pockets, and appearing to count money. Then it showed him walking back to his car, sitting inside for several minutes, and then returning to the store in an agitated state. Kevin had also pulled footage from the parking lot cameras and discovered something significant. Bob had made another stop after leaving Metro Mart the first time. The timestamp showed him entering a convenience store across the street, and when he emerged, he was carrying a small bag and no longer had the wallet visible in his hand. Bob Hendricks himself was having the worst morning of his life. After returning home yesterday, he had spent hours searching through his receipts and trying to reconstruct his day. The more he thought about it, the less certain he became about his accusations. His daughter had called last night, having heard about the incident through the neighborhood grapevine. "Dad, are you sure about what happened? Mrs. Patterson from down the street said there was quite a scene at the grocery store." I thought I was sure, but now I'm wondering if I made a mistake." That morning, Bob had found the receipt from the convenience store in his jacket pocket, a receipt for items he didn't remember purchasing, paid for with a $20 bill. Slowly, the pieces were coming together, and the picture they formed made him sick to his stomach. At Metro Mart, the day shift was struggling to maintain normal operations. Customers who had witnessed yesterday's events were asking questions, and several had specifically requested not to be served by Derek. The negative atmosphere was affecting everyone, from the newest cashiers to the department managers. "This is affecting our whole team," Marcus told Derek during their morning meeting. "Morale is at an all-time low, customers are upset, and we're getting calls from corporate. We need to do something." "Like what?" "Like admitting you made a mistake and trying to get Jasmine back." Derek's face darkened. "I didn't make a mistake. Brooks was a problem employee, and now she's gone. End of story." "Derek, you know that's not true. Jasmine was one of our best employees. Her customer service scores were consistently in the top percentile, she never missed shifts, and she was well liked by everyone, customers and staff alike." "She was insubordinate." "She asked to see security footage after being accused of theft. That's not insubordination. That's reasonable." The conversation was interrupted by Kevin Mitchell knocking on the office door. "Excuse me, Mr. Walsh, I need to show you something." Derek looked up irritably. "What is it, Mitchell?" Kevin entered carrying his tablet, which displayed the security footage from yesterday. "I've been reviewing the incident, and I think you need to see this." "I told you yesterday that reviewing the footage wasn't necessary." "With respect, sir, I think it's necessary now. We're getting inquiries from corporate, and they're going to want to see documentation." Kevin played the footage, pointing out the normal nature of the transaction, Bob's confusion with his money,
and Jasmine's professional handling of the situation. But the most damaging evidence came next. This is footage after Mr. Hendricks left the store the first time. You can see him in the parking lot looking confused, checking his pockets. Then he drives across the street to the Gas and Go convenience store. The footage showed Bob entering the convenience store and emerging several minutes later, having made clearly a purchase. I called the Gas and Go and spoke to their manager. Mr. Hendricks purchased a lottery ticket and some gum at 2:47 p.m., paying with a $20 bill. That would account for the money he thought was missing. Derek stared at the screen, watching his justification for firing Jasmine crumble in real time. The evidence was undeniable. Bob had been confused about his money because he had made another purchase that he'd forgotten about. Jasmine had done nothing wrong.
"This doesn't change anything," Derek said finally, but his voice was weak. "Derek," Marcus said quietly, "it changes everything. You fired an innocent employee based on false accusations. We need to call Jasmine immediately and offer her job back." "I'm not calling anyone," Derek snapped. "What's done is done." Kevin and Marcus exchanged glances. They both understood that Derek's refusal to admit error was going to make this situation much worse. Outside in the store, Elena was dealing with the aftermath of Derek's stubbornness in her own way. She had spent the morning encouraging customers to call corporate customer service if they were dissatisfied with how the situation had been handled. Several had taken her up on the suggestion. Mrs. Williams had returned to the store specifically to follow up on yesterday's events. She approached Elena at the customer service desk. "How was everyone holding up?" she asked. "We're all pretty shaken," Elena admitted. "Jasmine didn't deserve what happened to her." Mrs. Williams nodded gravely. "I've been thinking about that young woman all night. Such intelligence, such composure under pressure. She's going to go far in life, mark my words. I just hope she can get past this. Being falsely accused of theft? That could follow her around." Mrs. Williams smiled mysteriously. "I have a feeling Jasmine Brooks is going to be just fine. In fact, I suspect she's going to be better than fine." There was something in the elderly woman's tone that suggested she knew more than she was sharing, but Elena was too focused on the immediate crisis to pursue it. By noon, word had spread throughout the community about what happened at Metro Mart. Social media posts were appearing, customers were calling to complain, and the local news had gotten wind of the story. Derek's decision to fire Jasmine was becoming a public relations nightmare for the company. In the corporate offices across town, phones were ringing off the hook. Sarah Coleman, the regional investigator, was fielding call after call about discriminatory practices at the Metro Mart location, and the pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. "We need to conduct an immediate investigation," she told her supervisor. "This isn't just about one incident. We're getting reports of a pattern of discriminatory behavior from this manager." Plans were already being made for a surprise corporate inspection, but Sarah had no idea that forces beyond corporate oversight were also mobilizing. The legal system itself was taking notice of what happened at Metro Mart, and the consequences were going to be far more serious than Derek Walsh could possibly imagine. Derek Walsh arrived at work Wednesday morning with the grim determination of a man trying to convince himself he had made the right decision. The negative fallout from Jasmine's firing had continued to mount. More customer complaints, uncomfortable questions from other employees, and a growing sense that his authority was being questioned at every level. He had spent Tuesday evening crafting a narrative that painted his decision as necessary and justified. But even he was beginning to doubt his own story. The security footage Kevin had shown him was damning, but Derek's pride wouldn't allow him to admit he had been wrong. The morning started quietly enough. Derek went through his usual routine, checking overnight reports, reviewing staffing schedules, walking the floor to assert his presence. But there was a tension in the air that hadn't been there before Jasmine's firing, a sense that everyone was waiting for something to happen. Elena greeted him with barely concealed hostility. Marcus avoided eye contact, and even customers seemed to be watching him more carefully. The comfortable bubble of authority Derek had built around himself was developing cracks, and he could feel his control of the situation slipping. At 10:30 a.m., his phone rang. Metro Mart, Derek Walsh speaking. This is Sarah Coleman from Metro Mart Regional Operations. I need to speak with you immediately regarding your store. Derek felt his stomach drop. Sarah Coleman was known throughout the company as a thorough, no-nonsense investigator who specialized in workplace issues. If she was calling personally, it meant the situation had escalated beyond local management. Good morning, Miss Coleman. How can I help you? Mr. Walsh, we have received multiple complaints regarding discriminatory practices at your location. I'm calling to inform you that we will be conducting an immediate investigation beginning today. The words hit Derek like a physical blow. Discriminatory practices? I'm not sure what you're referring to. Mr. Walsh, in the past 24 hours, we have received 17 separate complaints about the termination of employee Jasmine Brooks. Customers, employees, and community members are all reporting the same story, that Jasmine Brooks was fired without cause after being falsely accused of theft.
Derek's mind raced. 17 complaints? He hadn't realized the story had spread so widely or generated such a response. Ms. Coleman, I can assure you that Ms. Brooks was terminated for cause after a customer complaint about missing money. I followed all proper procedures. Mr. Walsh, our preliminary review suggests that proper procedures were not followed. According to multiple reports, you refused to review security footage, ignored witness testimony, and terminated the employee despite a lack of evidence. Derek felt sweat beading on his forehead. The customer's testimony was evidence. Mr. Hendricks was very clear about what happened. Mr. Hendricks called our customer service line yesterday afternoon to recant his accusation, Sarah said, her voice cold and professional. He realized he had made an error and wanted to clarify that Ms. Brooks had done nothing wrong. The words hit Derek like a sledgehammer. Bob had recanted? When? Why hadn't anyone told him? I wasn't aware of that, Derek stammered. Mr. Walsh, this investigation will examine not only the Brooks termination, but also patterns of employee treatment at your location. We've received reports suggesting this wasn't an isolated incident. Derek's world was crumbling around him. If corporate was launching a full investigation, they would uncover everything, every biased decision, every unfair disciplinary action, every instance where he had let his prejudices influence his management. When will this investigation begin? He asked weakly. It's beginning now. I'll be arriving at your location within the hour with a team of investigators. We'll need to review personnel files, security footage, and conduct interviews with staff and customers. Derek tried to maintain some semblance of authority. Of course, we'll provide full cooperation. Mr. Walsh, I should also inform you that this matter has attracted attention beyond our corporate offices. The Richmond District Attorney's Office has received complaints about potential civil rights violations, and they may be conducting their own investigation. The mention of the District Attorney's Office sent a chill through Derek's body. What had started as a simple personnel decision was now potentially a legal matter involving criminal charges. Civil rights violations? Derek's voice cracked slightly. When an employee is terminated based on false accusations and proper procedures aren't followed, especially when there are allegations of racial bias, it can constitute a civil rights violation under federal law. Derek sank into his office chair, the full weight of his situation finally hitting him. He had let his prejudices and pride lead him into a legal nightmare that could destroy not only his career, but potentially land him in serious legal trouble. Miss Coleman, is there anything I can do to address this situation? Mr. Walsh,
At this point, the best thing you can do is cooperate fully with our investigation and be completely honest about what happened and why you made the decisions you did." After hanging up, Derek sat in his office staring at the phone. Through his window, he could see the store operating normally, customers shopping, employees working, the rhythm of commerce continuing as if his world wasn't collapsing. He thought about calling Jasmine to apologize, to offer her job back, to try to undo the damage he had done, but he realized it was too late for that. The situation had moved beyond his control, beyond simple workplace politics, and into the realm of legal consequences. Marcus knocked on his door and entered without waiting for permission. "Derek, I just got a call from corporate. They're sending an investigation team?" Derek nodded numbly. "Sarah Coleman will be here within the hour." Marcus looked at his colleague with a mixture of pity and disappointment. "Derek, you need to understand something. This isn't just about Jasmine anymore. They're looking at everything, every termination, every disciplinary action, every complaint that's been filed." The implication was clear. Derek's pattern of biased decision-making was about to be exposed under the harsh light of corporate scrutiny and potential legal investigation. "What should I do?" Derek asked, and for the first time in years, he sounded genuinely uncertain. Marcus looked at his colleague with a mixture of pity and disappointment. "You should have done the right thing from the beginning. You should have treated Jasmine fairly, reviewed the evidence, and admitted when you were wrong. But now I think you should call a lawyer." As Marcus left the office, Derek picked up his phone again. He had a feeling he was going to need all the help he could get, because the comfortable world of unchallenged authority he had built around himself was about to come crashing down.
And somewhere across town, forces were already in motion that would make Derek's current problems seem insignificant by comparison. The wheels of justice, once set in motion, were impossible to stop. The reckoning was coming, and Derek Walsh was about to learn that actions truly do have consequences. Sarah Coleman arrived at Metro Mart with a team of 3 investigators, their unmarked sedan pulling into the parking lot exactly 1 hour after her phone call to Derek. She was a woman in her 40s with steel-gray hair and the kind of penetrating gaze that made people want to confess their mistakes before she even asked questions. Derek watched through his office window as the team entered the store, their professional demeanor immediately apparent to anyone paying attention. Elena noticed them first, whispering to Marcus, who quickly made his way to Derek's office. "They're here," Marcus announced unnecessarily. Derek straightened his tie and walked out to greet them, trying to project confidence he didn't feel. "Miss Coleman, I'm Derek Walsh, the store manager." Sarah's handshake was firm and brief. "Mr. Walsh, these are my associates, Michael Torres and Jennifer Kim. We'll need a private space to conduct interviews and review documentation. Of course, you can use the conference room. It's right this way." As Derek led them to the back of the store, he could feel the eyes of every employee following their movement. The investigation team's presence had changed the entire atmosphere of the store. Conversations stopped mid-sentence, employees found sudden urgency in their tasks, and customers sensed the tension without understanding its source. "We'll need to start with personnel files for all employees terminated in the past 2 years. We'll also need copies of all disciplinary actions, customer complaints, and incident reports for the same period." Derek's heart sunk. 2 years of decisions were about to be scrutinized by people trained to spot patterns of discrimination. He thought about Maria Gonzalez, terminated for attendance issues despite having sick children. About James Washington, fired for insubordination after questioning a scheduling decision. About the subtle ways he had made certain employees feel unwelcome until they quit on their own. "I'll have those files prepared immediately," Derek said, his voice hollow. "We'll also need to interview the employee who was terminated yesterday, Jasmine Brooks. Do you have her contact information?" Derek hesitated. Yes, but I should mention that this was a clear case of employee theft. The customer was very specific about, Mr. Walsh, we're aware that the customer has recanted his accusation. Mr. Hendricks called our customer service line yesterday afternoon to clarify that he had made an error and that Ms. Brooks was innocent of any wrongdoing. The words hit Derek like a physical blow, even though he had been told this on the phone. Hearing it again, in person, made the reality of his mistake undeniable. Furthermore, we have security footage that corroborates the employee's innocence and shows that proper procedures were not followed. The security footage was never reviewed by management, despite the employee's request to examine it. This is a serious violation of company policy and potentially actionable under state and federal employment law. Jennifer Kim, one of the investigators, looked up from her notes. Mr. Walsh, can you walk us through your decision-making process for this termination? Derek found himself stumbling through an explanation that sounded weaker with every word. He tried to justify his refusal to review evidence, his dismissal of witness testimony, his decision to believe one confused customer over multiple credible witnesses. And what was your relationship with Ms. Brooks prior to this incident? Professional, Derek replied quickly, but even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true. His treatment of Jasmine had been colored by his assumptions and prejudices from the day she started talking about law school. No disciplinary actions, no performance issues? No, her performance was adequate. Sarah's eyebrow raised slightly. According to our preliminary information, Ms. Brooks had the highest customer service scores in the store and had never had a single register discrepancy in over a year of employment. Derek shifted uncomfortably in his chair. How did they get that information so quickly? Mr. Walsh, I want you to understand the seriousness of this situation. We're not just investigating one wrongful termination. We're examining whether there's a pattern of discrimination at this location. If we find evidence of systemic discrimination, the consequences will extend far beyond employment law. They could include federal civil rights violations.
The mention of federal charges made Derek's blood run cold. This wasn't just about losing his job anymore. This was about potential criminal liability. I need to ask you directly. Did Miss Brooks' race play any role in your decision to terminate her? Absolutely not, Derek said, but his voice cracked slightly. This was purely about the customer complaint. A customer complaint that turned out to be false, which you could have discovered by reviewing readily available evidence. Derek had no answer that wouldn't make his situation worse. While Derek Walsh's world crumbled under corporate scrutiny, Jasmine Brooks sat in her small apartment, staring at her phone. She had been expecting this call for weeks, but now that it might actually come, she found herself afraid to answer unknown numbers. The apartment was quiet except for the soft hum of her laptop, where she had been updating her resume and researching potential legal aid organizations that might need her help. The wrongful termination from Metro Mart had stung, but it had also clarified something for her. She wanted to work in civil rights law, protecting people who faced the kind of discrimination she had just experienced. Her phone buzzed with a text from Elena. Corporate investigation team is here. Derek looks like he's going to be sick. You were right to keep your dignity yesterday. Justice is coming. Jasmine smiled slightly. Elena was a good person, caught in a bad situation, and it was comforting to know that her former co-workers supported her. Another text, this one from Tommy. I told them everything. How Derek watched you differently, how he treated certain employees worse than others. They're taking notes on everything. The support from her former colleagues was touching, but Jasmine knew that their testimonies, while valuable, wouldn't undo what had happened to her. She still faced the challenge of finding new employment with the termination on her record, regardless of how unjustified it had been. Her phone rang. Unknown number, local area code. For a moment, she hesitated, then answered. Jasmine Brooks speaking. Miss Brooks, this is David Harrison from the Virginia Board of Bar Examiners. Are you available to speak privately? Jasmine's heart stopped. This was it, the call that would determine her future. She had been waiting for her bar exam results for weeks, and the delay had made her increasingly anxious. Yes, I'm available. Miss Brooks, I'm pleased to inform you that you have successfully passed the Virginia bar examination. Congratulations, counselor. The words washed over her like a wave of relief and joy so intense she had to sit down. Thank you, she managed. Thank you so much. Your scores were exceptional, particularly in constitutional law and civil rights. The examining board was impressed with your performance. Jasmine felt tears streaming down her face. After everything that had happened, after the humiliation and injustice at Metro Mart, she was now officially an attorney. There's more, David continued. I've been asked to inform you that the Richmond District Attorney's Office has been following your case and your academic performance. They're very interested in speaking with you about a position. The District Attorney's Office? Jasmine's voice was barely a whisper. Specifically, they're looking for someone to join their Civil Rights Division. Apparently, your law school professors spoke very highly of your commitment to justice and your academic excellence. They'd like to interview you tomorrow morning, if you're available. Jasmine's mind raced. The district attorney's office was exactly where she had dreamed of working, but she had assumed it would take years to earn such an opportunity. The timing seemed almost surreal. Miss Brooks, are you still there? Yes, I'm here. I would be honored to interview with the district attorney's office. Excellent. Report to District Attorney Michael Chen's office tomorrow at 9 a.m. And, Miss Brooks? Yes? Bring your Metro Mart termination documentation. I understand there may be some civil rights issues that need addressing. After hanging up, Jasmine sat in her apartment, overwhelmed by the sudden reversal of her fortunes. 24 hours ago, she was a cashier unjustly fired from a grocery store. Now, she was an attorney with an interview for her dream job. She thought about Mrs. Williams's words about justice coming from unexpected directions. The elderly woman had seemed to know something, had spoken with such certainty about Jasmine's future. Had she somehow known this was coming?
Derek Walsh arrived at Metro Mart Thursday morning to find his world in complete chaos. The corporate investigation team had worked late into the previous evening, and their preliminary findings were damning. Sarah Coleman had already called twice, requesting additional documentation and informing him that the investigation would be expanding to include potential federal charges. But Derek's personal crisis was about to become insignificant compared to what was walking through the front doors of his store. At 9:15 a.m., a sleek black sedan pulled into the Metro Mart parking lot. The Richmond District Attorney's official vehicle was immediately recognizable to anyone familiar with local government. From the driver's seat emerged District Attorney Michael Chen, a man whose reputation for pursuing civil rights cases had made him both respected and feared throughout the region. From the passenger seat stepped Jasmine Brooks. She was wearing a sharp business suit, her hair professionally styled, and carrying a briefcase that contained her new bar certification and enough evidence to destroy Derek Walsh's career and potentially his freedom. The transformation from grocery store cashier to legal professional was complete, and the power dynamic that Derek had exploited was about to be reversed in the most dramatic way possible. Elena Rodriguez was the first to spot them through the store windows. She stood frozen for a moment, then grabbed Marcus's arm. "You need to see this," she whispered. Marcus looked out and felt his knees go weak. That's Jasmine, and she's with the district attorney." Word spread through the store like wildfire. Tommy Martinez dropped the box he was carrying. Kevin Mitchell emerged from the security office, his jaw agape. Even customers sensed something significant was happening as employees whispered urgently to one another. Derek was in his office, on the phone with his lawyer, when Elena knocked on his door. "Derek, you need to come out here, now!" "I'm busy, Elena. Whatever it is can wait." "No, Derek, it really can't wait. Trust me." Derek ended his call and followed Elena out of his office. When he saw Jasmine walking through his store with the district attorney, he felt his legs nearly give out. The confident woman striding through Metro Mart bore no resemblance to the cashier he had humiliated 2 days earlier. This was someone who commanded respect, someone with real power, someone who could destroy him. "Good morning, Mr. Walsh," District Attorney Chen said, his voice carrying the authority of his office. "I believe you remember Attorney Jasmine Brooks." The title hit Derek like a sledgehammer. Attorney Brooks. Not former employee, not terminated cashier, but Attorney Brooks. Jasmine looked Derek directly in the eye, her expression calm and professional. "Mr. Walsh, I believe we have some things to discuss." The store had gone completely quiet. Customers had stopped shopping, employees had abandoned their tasks, and even customers sensed something significant was happening as employees whispered urgently to one another. Derek was in his office, on the phone with his lawyer, when Elena knocked on his door. "Derek, you need to come out here, now!" "I'm busy, Elena. Whatever it is can wait." "No, Derek, it really can't wait. Trust me." Derek ended his call and followed Elena out of his office. When he saw Jasmine walking through his store with the district attorney, he felt his legs nearly give out. The confident woman striding through Metro Mart bore no resemblance to the cashier he had humiliated 2 days earlier. This was someone who commanded respect, someone with real power, someone who could destroy him. "Good morning, Mr. Walsh," District Attorney Chen said, his voice carrying the authority of his office. "I believe you remember Attorney Jasmine Brooks." The title hit Derek like a sledgehammer. Attorney Brooks. Not former employee, not terminated cashier, but Attorney Brooks. Jasmine looked Derek directly in the eye, her expression calm and professional. "Mr. Walsh, I believe we have some things to discuss." The store had gone completely quiet. Customers had stopped shopping, employees had abandoned their tasks, and even customers sensed something significant was happening as employees whispered urgently to one another. Derek was in his office, on the phone with his lawyer, when Elena knocked on his door. "Derek, you need to come out here, now!" "I'm busy, Elena. Whatever it is can wait." "No, Derek, you really can't wait. Trust me." Derek ended his call and followed Elena out of his office. When he saw Jasmine walking through his store with the district attorney, he felt his legs nearly give out. The confident woman striding through Metro Mart bore no resemblance to the cashier he had humiliated 2 days earlier. This was someone who commanded respect, someone with real power, someone who could destroy him. "Good morning, Mr. Walsh," District Attorney Chen said, his voice carrying the authority of his office. "I believe you remember Attorney Jasmine Brooks." The title hit Derek like a sledgehammer. Attorney Brooks. Not former employee, not terminated cashier, but Attorney Brooks. Jasmine looked Derek directly in the eye, her expression calm and professional. "Mr. Walsh, I believe we have some things to discuss." The store had been completely quiet. Customers had stopped shopping, employees had abandoned their tasks, and even customers sensed something significant was happening as employees whispered urgently to one another. District Attorney Michael Chen stepped forward, his presence commanding immediate attention from everyone in the store. "Mr. Walsh, we're here to conduct a preliminary investigation into potential federal civil rights violations. Attorney Brooks will be leading this investigation, given her intimate knowledge of the workplace conditions at this location." Jasmine opened her briefcase and withdrew a legal pad, her movements precise and professional. The transformation was complete.
Gone was any trace of the accommodating cashier who had endured Derek's subtle harassment and obvious bias. In her place stood a legal professional, armed with the law and personal experience of injustice.
"Mr. Walsh," Jasmine said, her voice steady and authoritative, "I need you to understand that this is now an official investigation. You have the right to legal representation, and I recommend you exercise that right." Derek's mouth opened and closed wordlessly. Around the store, employees had abandoned any pretense of working. Elena Rodriguez stood near the customer service desk with tears in her eyes, not of sadness, but of vindication. Tommy Martinez watched with wide-eyed amazement, while Marcus Thompson shook his head in disbelief at Derek's complete reversal of fortune. I don't understand," Derek finally managed. "You were just a cashier. Yesterday, I was a law school graduate working part-time while waiting for my bar results. Today, I'm an attorney investigating civil rights violations. Your decision to fire me based on false accusations while refusing to examine evidence that would have proven my innocence has provided us with a clear example of discriminatory employment practices." Kevin Mitchell approached the group carrying his security tablet. "Attorney Brooks," he said, his voice filled with respect and barely contained excitement, "I preserved all the security footage from the incident. Everything is documented. The transaction, Mr. Hendrick's confusion, and Mr. Walsh's refusal to review the evidence." "Thank you, Kevin," Jasmine said, accepting the tablet. "This footage will be crucial evidence in our investigation." Derek watched helplessly as the evidence of his misconduct was handed over to the very person he had wronged. "This is insane. You can't investigate me. There's a conflict of interest." "Actually, Mr. Walsh," District Attorney Chen interjected, "Attorney Brooks is uniquely qualified to investigate this matter. Her first-hand experience as a victim of discriminatory practices, combined with her legal training, makes her the ideal person to examine whether this was an isolated incident or part of a pattern." Sarah Coleman, the corporate investigator, had been watching the proceedings with professional interest. She approached the group with her own documentation. "Attorney Brooks, District Attorney Chen, I'm Sarah Coleman from Metro Mart Corporate Investigations. We've been conducting our own internal investigation, and I believe our findings will be relevant to your inquiry." "What have you discovered?" Jasmine asked. Sarah glanced at Derek, whose face had gone pale. "We've identified a pattern of discriminatory disciplinary actions and terminations spanning the past 2 years. Mr. Walsh has consistently applied different standards to employees based on race, ethnicity, and perceived social status. The Brooks termination appears to be the culmination of this pattern, not an isolated incident." Derek felt the walls closing in around him. "That's not true. I've always treated all employees fairly." "Mr. Walsh," Jasmine interrupted, consulting her legal pad, "in the past 18 months, you've terminated 5 employees of color for reasons that were later determined to be questionable or entirely fabricated. You've written up 12 employees for minor infractions that you've ignored when committed by white employees. You've consistently assigned less desirable shifts and denied advancement opportunities to minority workers." Elena Rodriguez stepped forward, her voice strong despite the emotion behind it. "It's all true. Derek has made this workplace hostile for anyone who doesn't fit his narrow idea of the right kind of employee." Tommy Martinez nodded vigorously. "He threatened my job yesterday just for telling the truth about what I witnessed." More employees began speaking up, sharing their experiences of Derek's biased treatment. The pattern became undeniable. Derek had created a workplace environment where discrimination was normalized and unchallenged. Bob Hendricks, who had been shopping quietly in the back of the store, approached the group with obvious distress. "Excuse me," he said, his voice shaking. "I'm the customer who made the complaint. I want everyone to know that I was wrong. I was confused and I accused that young woman of something she didn't do." He looked directly at Jasmine, his eyes filled with remorse. "I'm so sorry for what I put you through. I found the receipt from where I spent the money I thought was missing. You were nothing but kind and patient with me, and I let my confusion hurt you." Jasmine's expression softened slightly.
Mr. Hendricks, I understand. No one blames you for being confused. The issue isn't your mistake, it's how that mistake was handled by management. District Attorney Chen addressed the growing crowd of employees and customers. This investigation will examine whether federal civil rights laws were violated through discriminatory employment practices. We take these matters very seriously, and anyone who has experienced or witnessed discrimination at this location is encouraged to come forward. Derek looked around desperately, seeing his authority crumble in real time. The employees who had once feared him now felt empowered to speak out. The customers who had witnessed his behavior were nodding in agreement with the investigation. His comfortable world of unchecked power was collapsing. I want to call my lawyer, Derek said weakly. That's your right, Mr. Walsh, Jasmine replied. But I should inform you that this investigation extends beyond employment law. If we find evidence of intentional civil rights violations, federal criminal charges may be filed. The mention of criminal charges sent a visible shudder through Derek. He had thought the worst consequence would be losing his job, but now he was facing the possibility of federal prosecution. Mrs. Patricia Williams, who had been observing everything with quiet satisfaction, approached Jasmine. "Young woman, I knew from the first day I met you that you were destined for greatness. This community is fortunate to have someone like you fighting for justice." "Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Your support meant more to me than you know." As the investigation began in earnest, with statements being taken and evidence being collected, Derek Walsh realized that his years of discriminatory behavior had finally caught up to him. The woman he had underestimated, dismissed, and wrongfully terminated was now the architect of his downfall. Justice, it seemed, had a sense of irony that Derek was only beginning to appreciate. And that brings us to the end of this encounter. Don't forget to check out the rest of the videos on the screen. If you're not yet subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and ring that bell so you don't miss any latest uploads from us. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.